He started to follow her and kept thinking about what just happened, and if she had experienced something bad before joining the academy, if she was holding a strong hatred in her heart. After that, both of them rushed their way towards the destination and had not talked to each other during the time. He hadn't known how to calm her down, so he had not dared to say anything. But after a while, her anger slowly subsided on its own. She asked him if the soul guide he used was showing the location correctly, as she was not sure if that was where he was headed, and if that thing might be the source of danger she had felt earlier. Astonished, he asked if she was sure about it. He added that the deeper they went, the less they would find the soul beasts, and they also had not encountered anything dangerous so far. She replied to him that if they had not seen anything, then it could be the most dangerous place. She also told him that if there was a forest, then he would have always found a soul beast wherever he had gone. But if there would not be any forest, then that place was assumed extremely dangerous and not suitable for living. He reminded her that she still had time to go back. She told him to stop saying that again and again. She also asked if the person he was meaning to save was Donger. He confusingly looked at her but did not reply. She further said that she had thought who it might be and came to that conclusion. He explained to her that even if something had ever happened to his other friends, he would have probably done the same. She then asked him about reframing the questions, but he stared at her and remained silent. As they continued their journey, Chor stopped and asked Yuhao if he had felt that it was suddenly getting darker from that point onwards. He responded with a yes, saying that after checking it with his spiritual detection skill, he too felt that the pressure was increased to look further. She then asked if it was because the nighttime was closer. Yuhao informed that it was still early evening and the sun was also not covered by dark clouds. She replied that there was only one possibility: it was getting darker, which was the air around them. He questioned, sounding baffled that how it was the air. She suggested him to use the soul guide to see what their destiny looked from the above. They looked down the hill to the place where they were headed and saw mist over it that was getting thicker and thicker as the time had passed. She inquired if it was poison, as poison mist would not generally clear away, even when all the living being within had decomposed. She further told him that without any rain or wind in that place, the poisonous mist would have grown to the extent that was visible to his eyes at that moment. She had seen poison mist in the Stardew Forest, but she had never seen the one that strong and wide. Every poison had a different and unique effect, ranging from dizziness, nausea, to death, and some even had mental corrosion effect. Sweat had started to drip from his face, and they both felt anxious about it. It seemed like the danger she had felt before came from inside that poison mist, and that was not something they could counter with their soul power. Yuhao insisted Chioer to come back and said that it was very dangerous. She worriedly said if he was really going to face a situation like that where no human being had ever survived. He told her that he had a way, and if he tried, it might have worked. He added to it that he was willing to do anything for Donger, and asked Chioer to go back as he had no reason to follow him in that. She retraced her steps back and asked him that if he really thought he could enter the core area with his idea or not. She continued that there was so much poison that he would not be able to determine where he was going. She warned him that some poison in there which were corrosive in nature even had mental corruption effect. She inquired further that how long he thought the air inside the thing in his hand could support him. Yuhao sat on the ground, covered with emotions and sorrow, saying that he tried to imagine his life without Donger and realized that his world would turn gray and into pieces without her. And that was the moment he knew that she was the most important person in his heart, and her life was even more valuable than his own for him. He continued telling her that how important she was in his life, and for her, he was even willing to go inside that poison mist that could bring him certain death. She questioned herself with uncertainty that how someone was actually willing to do anything for the sake of someone else. She couldn't understand him and what he was about to do for Donger. He turned around and saw Chor was still standing behind. He asked her why she was not going back. She counter-questioned him that why she should go back when he wanted to see how a certain stupid person would die. After listening that sentence, he got reminded of a memory of how Donger used to call him an idiot. He smiled and said that he was not a stupid person, he was an idiot. She got frustrated and commanded him to go in his brain somewhere. He told her that Donger had once called him an idiot, and because that was what she said to him, he considered himself an idiot. He asked Chioer to leave the next day as she was already very late, and if she was willing to stay, she would wait for him outside the forest. He further told her if he had not come out even in 3 days, she would not tell anyone about where he had gone and just let everyone thinking that he went missing. Chioer called him an idiot and hit him with her fist. She screamed at him as he was going in the forest and questioned if that was really worth it. She forced him to answer her. He responded that of course it was worth it, and if Donger could stay alive, that was all what mattered to him. He does not care how dangerous it was, and he would have still gone even if his survival chances were 1 in a million. It got darker and darker, and the both were sitting in front of the fire while Chiure was having a drink. Yuhao told her that he was very serious of going inside the forest and asked her to leave the next morning. She got angry and asked why does he care about her, and if he could act like an idiot, she could too. He tried to explain her the danger of the forest and she should not risk her life because of him. He doesn't even know himself if he would succeed in it or not. She stood up and started to yell at him that she was tired of listening to his plan and demanded that if they had come together that far, then why would he experience the adventure alone? Although Chuer was being cold and harsh with him, but whenever her friends had faced any problem, she could be warmer than anyone else. Dong-er got excited and told her that if she would insist on going with him, then his success rate would boost up to 80%. Chuer made confused-faced, asking if he was sure about that. He convinced her by saying that he wasn't lying and asked her to listen to his plan carefully. His plan was that during the day when the sun would be over the top, the poison had been evaporated slightly. That was the time when the thickness of the poison mist would be at its lowest. His uncle Niu Tian was the one who told him about that, and he was sure he would not want him to get hurt or trick him there, and there was a way to get inside. The next morning, when the sun had evaporated some of the poison mist, Yu Hao also used his soul guide to make the poison mist evaporate quickly. However, he was not able to directly aim the attack towards the ground, but it surely made a blast that created a hole in poison mist. Yu Hao and Chuer used that chance to enter the forest and activated his 6th level soul guide that provided them with a protective shield ring. As they entered the forest, everything was in the shade of pink and blue, including the sky. Yu Hao got speechless and found it mesmerizing and very beautiful. Chuer responded that the forest being beautiful was not she liked there and the air inside was unfit for living. The mist was thin from what they had expected, but still it was eroding the soul guide slowly. She told him to follow her steps as her martial soul could freeze the poison on the ground. On their way, Yu Hao saw melted bones of the soul beasts and realized how strong the poisonous mist would be, as the beast bones were considered the hardest part of their body. It also made him realize that everything was possible in that forest. As the soul beasts had melted, they were turned into nutrients for the poisonous mist, and the mist still continued to devour the soul beasts that had passed by. Even the soul beasts that had flown far in the sky were no exception. If that would go on, it was expected that after 1,000 years later, the whole sunset forest would have been filled with the poisonous mist, and that was very horrible. They both started to hear a buzzing noise from far away, and their eyesight had gotten worse and worse, and maybe it was time to change the soul guide soon. But while changing that, if he'd make a single mistake, the poisonous mist would erode him before he could even react. He asked her to come closer to him for a second. He held Chuer tightly from her back and stared into her eyes while changing the soul guide that had put her into confusion of what he was trying to do, and if he was worried that his soul skills might hurt her. She got curious of how far they would have to go inside, and if the poisonous fog was continuously going to erode the soul guide, they would be poisoned in no time. He then held her hand and they both continued going inside the forest. The center was 7 kilometers away when Yu Hao checked the spiritual detection on the entrance. They arrived to a spot where there were weird-looking plants that were repelling the mist. Chuer insisted on checking the plants, but he stopped her, saying that he would try it out first. He picked up a stone and threw over them, and it broke into pieces as soon as it touched the plants that showed the corrosiveness of them. It was platinum metal, which had very strong resistance. He then took out his fire gun and aimed towards the mist to check if it was afraid of fire or not. As soon as he fired up the place, there was a blast, and 2 strangely formed beings started to attack them, and they had to run away from there. Yu Hao found it troublesome that the poisonous mist was able to fight back. Choir apologized to him and told him that she remembered what plant it was. It was jade phosphorus of the 7 absolutes and came under the category of the 7 most poisonous plants in the world. These were not only corrosive, but also very terrifying, and when a body was poisoned, not only it would be corroded, but it would also give unimaginable pain. But that plant was extremely rare to find, and was the dream of every plant-type soul master. Yu Hao wondered if everything surrounding them was that plant, and if it was, why was it called a rare plant to find? She informed him that those plants lived in groups and had poor reproductive ability. She further added to it that most of the plants that had just seen then were evolved into plant-type soul beasts, and they were the reason the poison had attacked them back. Their level was at least 10,000 years, and even if a group of high-level masters would have come there, they would have tried their best to avoid it because that type of soul beast with the support of poisonous mist was almost unbeatable. Yu Hao got disappointed and came out of the forest and sat under a tree. He thought that his uncle Niu Tian must have given him that task in consideration of his strength and ability, but even if it was a little hard, there should have been a chance for him to complete it. After getting to know about the plant and its level, he realized they were close to 0 success rate, and if they would push themselves, it was only going to become a fertilizer for them. He apologized to Donger in his thoughts that there was no hope left, and he was not able to anything for her. Kier knew a way to cross it and asked Yu Hao if he was interested in listening to it. She made him realize that the herb needed to treat Donger was surrounded widely with that jade phosphorus flowers. He knew that, but he had no way of moving forward, as his shield was instantly collapsing whenever it had touched the poisonous mist. She reminded him of how desperate he was to save Donger, and asked if he had ever heard the saying that everything in the world had advantages and disadvantages. No matter how strong the poison of the jade phosphorus was, it was impossible for it to not have a weakness. Yu Hao questioned that she had not told him that before. She taunted him that he was the one who wanted to treat Donger and not her. He insisted to tell him the way, but it made her feel angry to see him trying so hard to save Donger. She asked him to beg her for it, only then she would tell him the way. She couldn't understand her feeling of why she was asking him to do that and was not able to control her anger. Yu Hao wondered if she was being crazy to ask him to do that, but instead she called him crazy, yelling that why he was willing to risk his life for getting that herb and was begging to ask her about it that hard. She continued saying that if could not do that, he should just go back to the academy. She started to move away from him. He even tried to stop her, but she did not. She was constantly thinking if he was regretting not begging her for the herb. After all, a person's own life was always important than anyone else. A few seconds later, Yu Hao started to beg her to tell him how to avoid the jade phosphorus flower. It made her wonder that how could he even gave up on his honor as a man just to save Donger's life. After listening to his begging, Kyer started crying, but she had no idea why she was acting that way. She held his collar and banged him against the tree stem, asking if he was mocking her, and why he was going that far for Donger.